So hello everyone. So I'm the last presenter today, and it has been a long day. Most of you maybe don't want to listen to this. So I hope you find it interesting. So I'm Alhasan, a PhD student at the Department of Physics in the University of Otago, supervised by Michael and Jonathan Lever. So my current research is focusing on the role of green hydrogen in decarbonizing the New Zealand heavy transport. In today's presentation, I will focusing on the impact of consumer behavior on the uptake of hydrogen heavy vehicles, taking New Zealand as a case study. So looking at the New Zealand greenhouse gas emissions in 2022, so almost half of the energy emissions comes from transport. Regarding heavy vehicles, while they are only represent only 4% of the New Zealand total fleet, but we see they contribute by about 25% of these emissions, and that in the meantime. So they are expected to rise to 41% by 2055, and that clarifies the importance of decarbonizing this challenging sector. So hydrogen is a promising alternative fuel, but currently the uptake of hydrogen heavy vehicles still facing lots of challenges. The main two challenges are the lack of hydrogen infrastructure and the high capital cost of hydrogen vehicles. So, for example, customers will not purchase hydrogen vehicles unless adequate fueling is available. Then manufacturers will not produce vehicles without sufficient demand. And then fuel providers will not install hydrogen stations for customers that do not exist. So these challenges create a feedback loop, which known as the chicken and egg problem, which is a common issue that face most of alternative fuel vehicles. What about battery electric vehicles? Do they have a role in decarbonizing EV transport? So I would like to clarify that in our model, we categorized the New Zealand heavy fleet based on vehicle weight into three main categories. So battery electric vehicles for sure could play a significant role under this category. But given the heavy load and the long travel distances of these two categories, battery electric vehicles couldn't play a role under these two categories. So for example, so currently we are simulating the hydrogen heavy vehicles under these two categories and assuming that there are no alternative vehicles within this class. But in our next simulation, we will incorporate this class and incorporate battery electric vehicles and any other alternatives as well. So for example, for a battery electric vehicles weighing more than 30 tons and traveling 500 kilometers, the expected battery weight is ranging between 5 tons to 12 tons. And that's based on the battery density and the vehicle efficiency. And that represents about 15 to 30% of the payload, makes these vehicles economically not viable. So I don't agree with Harry that. So I think we are not in a way that we say, is hydrogen is better or battery better? We can say that it's complementary. So we can say that hydrogen can be used in some categories, and also for sure, battery electric vehicles are more efficient for light vehicles and for medium heavy vehicles. So hydrogen, so as I mentioned, that clarifies the challenges that face the decarbonizing the heavy transport. So hydrogen diesel dual fuel vehicles could be a potential alternative. So in New Zealand, H.W. Richardson start converting the conventional diesel vehicles to operate on a mix of hydrogen and diesel. So these vehicles are flexible to operate on 100% diesel if there's no hydrogen stations available, and they have the advantage to travel farther range. But we still don't know what is the actual role that they could play in decarbonizing the New Zealand heavy transport, and that led us to the research questions. So the first objective of the current research is to investigate the role of dual fuel vehicles in decarbonizing the New Zealand heavy transport, and investigate their role and how could they impact the uptake of other hydrogen vehicles as well. They could positively or negatively impact the uptake of other hydrogen vehicles. Sorry. So in order to do that, we need to simulate the consumer behavior towards these alternatives and all other technologies as well. So based on literature, we found that there are two important theories that simulating consumer behavior towards alternative fuel vehicles. The first one focuses on the impact of fuel availability as a barrier for the uptake of hydrogen vehicles. The other one focuses on the annual refueling cost as an important economic factor. But we actually don't know what impacts consumer decisions toward alternative fuel vehicles. So in order to understand consumer perspectives on fuel availability versus annual refueling cost, we need to simulate the uptake under these theories. So we have done a techno-economic analysis using the existing model Unitec with the aim of simulating hydrogen and diesel heavy vehicles from 2015 to 2050. So what is Unitec? It's a multi-regional system dynamics model that has been used to simulate the New Zealand energy system for several years. The model divides New Zealand into two main islands and 13 regions. The model enables a simultaneous simulation for all these sectors. The vehicle model depends on the consumer choice behavior in differentiating between the different technologies using the nested multinomial logit model. So the model can forecast the interactions of over 2,000 key variables and can do hourly time steps. And the model is resource in terms of technology specificity. So this is the nested vehicle structure, having four main nests. In the current simulation, these are the vehicles that we are considering: the conventional diesel heavy vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, hydrogen internal combustion engine vehicles, and hydrogen diesel dual fuel vehicles. And of course, there are heavy vehicles. So the simulation period is from 2015 to 2050, but the introduction year of hydrogen vehicles is in 2025. So this algorithm gives the probability of the chosen vehicles by consumer based on their preferences towards vehicle attributes. So what are the vehicle attributes? They are the vehicle capital cost, the annual maintenance cost, annual fuel cost, battery replacement cost for electric vehicles, vehicle range, and the fuel availability. So as I mentioned, that we focuses on two main theories. So this is the first utility function that has the fuel availability as a main factor. So from now onward, we will call this fuel availability utility. The second utility function, we are not comparing between totally two different utilities. It's exactly the same, but rather than fuel availability, here we have the annual refueling cost. So we will call this refueling cost utility. But so what do I mean by refueling cost utility? It's not the fuel cost, as we have the annual fuel cost as a separated factor. So the refueling cost, it's related to the refueling process, which mainly based on four main factors: the surge cost, which is the time and fuel consumed while finding the nearest station, and the refueling time cost, the queuing cost, and the risk of being out of fuel. So we run different scenarios. Today, I will focus on three main ones. So in the business as usual scenario, we simulated the conventional diesel vehicle and two types of hydrogen vehicles: hydrogen fuel cell vehicles and hydrogen internal combustion engine vehicles without applying any policies. Same vehicle types are simulated in the second scenario, but here we applied a kind of policy, assuming that 7 hydrogen stations are established per year from 2025 to 2040. We incorporate the hydrogen diesel dual fuel vehicles in the third scenario. But here I would like to clarify that what the difference is. I mean, in the first and the third scenarios, the model is automatically install hydrogen stations based on the fuel demand and vehicle uptake. While here we are forcing the model to install 7 hydrogen stations per year as a kind of sensitivity analysis in order to know how hydrogen stations impact the uptake. So this shows the uptake of hydrogen vehicles under the 2 utilities. So as mentioned, that this is focuses on the impact of fuel availability on consumer decisions, while this is focuses on annual refueling cost, while the other factors are the same. So there's no big differences overall in the uptake. We see that the uptake of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles and hydrogen ICE is very low in the first decade under the 2 utilities. Then they significantly increase beyond 2035. And we see that the consumers favor dual fuel vehicles over time under the 2 utilities. So we can see that due to the low capital and fuel cost of dual fuel vehicles and their flexibility to operate on 100% diesel in case with no hydrogen stations, so that make them good alternative and they can be used as a transitional technology. This graph shows the uptake of fuel cell vehicles under the fuel availability utility in 3 different scenarios. So we see that supporting hydrogen stations significantly increases the uptake of fuel cell vehicles over time. Similarly, we can see that the introduction of dual fuel vehicles increases fuel cell vehicle uptake, particularly at early stages or at the first 15 to 20 years. While if refueling cost is the main factor, we see that because the uptake of hydrogen vehicles under this utility function is less sensitive to the lack of hydrogen stations. So the uptake of fuel cell vehicles, even with or without dual fuel vehicles, is almost the same. But the common thing, we can see that the uptake of fuel cell vehicles in the scenarios with dual fuel vehicles under the 2 utilities, the long-term uptake is less than the other scenarios, meaning that dual fuel vehicles may impact the uptake of fuel cell vehicles in the long term. So dual fuel vehicles could play a significant role, as we found that they increase fuel cell vehicle uptake, particularly under this utility function. So they act at supporting hydrogen stations, but they may compete the long-term uptake of fuel cell vehicles. This shows the evolution of hydrogen stations under the 3 different scenarios. We see that the evolution of hydrogen stations is very low in the business as usual case, while the introduction of dual fuel vehicles increases and accelerates the evolution of hydrogen stations, similarly to the scenario with supporting hydrogen stations. This shows the greenhouse gas emissions under the 2 utilities in the 3 different scenarios. Yeah, it's obvious that the both scenarios supporting hydrogen stations and the introduction of dual fuel vehicles significantly decrease the greenhouse gas emissions over time. So the main conclusions is that we can say that the dual fuel vehicles could play a significant role in decarbonizing the New Zealand heavy transport. So being that the high capital cost and the lack of infrastructure act as the main barriers for uptake of fuel cell hydrogen heavy fuel cell vehicles, then they are a good alternative and could be used as a transitional technology. And we found that they increase fuel cell vehicle uptake and accelerates the evolution of hydrogen stations as they act as supporting hydrogen stations. And then they accelerate the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, but they may compete and impact fuel cell vehicle uptake at later stages. Regarding the consumer behavior towards the two utilities, so if fuel availability is the dominant factor, then the quantity of hydrogen stations significantly impact and influences consumer decisions toward alternative fuel vehicles, so that high infrastructure is required. On the other hand, if refueling cost is the dominant factor, then rather than increasing the number of hydrogen stations, we found that the quality of refueling process significantly influences consumer decisions, so that rather than focusing on high infrastructure, a better distribution of hydrogen stations, which can guarantee a near distances between stations and short queuing and refueling times is significantly required. I just would like to take the opportunity to thank the joint German BMBF and New Zealand MBIE grants supporting this research, including my PhD scholarship, and Honoka Hawaii, and my supervisors, and the H.W. Richardson team for their support. And thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and perfectly in time. So we have a few minutes for a couple of questions if people are interested to follow up on this.
Thank you so much for this nice presentation. Not a question of what you're doing actually, but a question to know your opinion. Freight transportation is also in the middle rung of the Michael Liebrich's hydrogen ladder. So it is kind of, there is an ongoing debate of focusing on electrification of that sector or focusing on like alternative fuels like hydrogen or hydrogen-driven fuels. Given the case of New Zealand that we have relatively small economy compared to Europe, and there is somewhat the possibility of having high cost of producing green hydrogen here. And again, having the assumption that for producing that green hydrogen, we would require enough installed renewable capacity. What would be your opinion of the future of freight transportation in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So now, yeah, I mean, we can give a full insights based on the current, because we are still now working on the mitigation cost, comparing between these different scenarios. So yeah, can't answer this question right now. So we are working on the economic calculations. So rather than we can say how much it will cost to mitigate these tons of CO2 using even hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and we see if maybe it's better, as you said, to invest in other sectors or something like this. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's not important, because we found that 25% of the emissions from road transportation come from heavy transport, while they are representing only 4% of the total fleet. So maybe, yeah, it's challenging and easy in the, yeah, something like this. Yeah.
Right. Any last questions? Online. Great. Well, thank you so much, Alhasan, and also thank you to everybody who's been part of this session.